What's going on, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Next Gen Pod. We're back with you is Ani Umana, the host, and Joe Tipton and Jamie Shaw of Rivals on 3. Guys, how you feeling? McDonald's All-American game was announced yesterday. The roster was. We were flooded with phone calls, but Joe, how you feeling afterwards?
Doing good, man. Glad I don't have to get any more texts like, "Hey, do you have the roster yet?" Those are annoying. And I was telling Jamie yesterday, part of me is glad that I'm not on the voting committee, because imagine all the phone calls I would get, like, "Hey, can you vote my kid?" All of that. Like, I would prefer not to have to take those calls every year because of the abundance of it. But no, all is well over here.
Yeah. How about you, Jamie?
All good, man. Yeah, no, it's real. It's here. The McDonald's game's been announced. This is where we're going. Now we're wrapping up the high school season. We're coming down the home stretch, conference play, about the interconference tournaments, and then state tournaments and all that type of stuff as well. So, it's coming down the home stretch for these seniors, man. This class of 2026 that we've watched come through all the way, ninth grade, and watched them come through. Another cycle is about to come to an end here, and the announcement of the McDonald's All-American game means it's close. So, it's an exciting time. It's good.
Yeah, so speaking of the roster, the East roster, we got Latrell Allman, Oklahoma State commit, Darius Bivens from Bishop O'Connell, Bruce Branch, Tony Bryant, Josiah Jervis, Taylor Kinney, Adonis Ratliff, Darius Ratliff, Jackson Richardson, Deron Rippey Jr., Jordan Smith Jr., Anthony Thompson. Now for the West, we have Max Adams, J.J. Andrews, Christian Collins, Quinn Costello, Jason Crow Jr., Arafon Jane, hopefully I said his last name right, Caleb Gaskins, Austin Gooseby, Caleb Holt, Brandon McCoy, Tyron Stokes, and Cam Williams. Looking at that roster, Jamie, what's your first thoughts when you first saw this?
It's going to be interesting to see how. The thing about the McDonald's game that gets me the most excited always is the practices. The practices leading up is just really one of the more competitive environments that you see. That USA basketball, whenever they're getting into a training camp in June for USA basketball, and you get the 32 trying to get down to the 13. That and McDonald's practices are the most competitive environments. All they let in is family, NBA executives, and pre-approved scouts, and they go for 2-3 hours, and you get to see these players compete. I like a little bit the positional diversity that they had in here, especially when you're looking at the bigs. You have the big, hulking, strong big of like an Arfan Jane. You have the more perimeter-based guys like a Quinn Costello or a Ratliff twin. You even in the wings, you have athletes like Jackson Richardson, coming into play, and then Maxie Adams, who's very skilled with positional size in the point guard spot. So I like the positional diversity they put together, and what we're going to be able to see compete, the different styles, the different types of players within this class. This has been a late blooming class to begin with. What we're seeing in this 2026, who was at the top at the very start, is not necessarily who's at the top right now. Guys topped off, but you also have guys that are staying there. Guys like the Caleb Holtz of the world, guys like the Tyron Stokes of the world, guys like Jordan Smith, guys who early we knew who they were and they've been able to produce throughout. But then you have late blooming guys coming in. So it's going to be very interesting to see how the Christian Collins of the world, how the Brandon McCoys of the world, how these guys are able to compete and maybe get some a little bit of more clarity at the top of this class. Because I think that once you get past Tyron Stokes at 1, I think there's 2 through 14 or 15 within this class. There's a lot of questions that can go in any order whatsoever. So the week of McDonald's All-American practices really, really could be a proving grounds and tell a lot as to moving forward, as to rankings purposes and how to kind of put place in order.
Yeah, 100%. The practices are the most fun part, right? That's where they're really competitive. They're getting after it. We see it in the games and like Spurs, but has a little bit more all-star feel. Not like NBA all-star, like complete no defense, but you see them having a little bit more fun. Where in the practices is a way more intense environment of scrimmages. Joe, looking at this list, what's your thought? Jamie talks about like kind of the difference in like the archetypes and the positions. What's something that really stood out to you when looking at this roster?
Yeah, I think the first thing to where my mind goes is when you look through the roster, there's always some guys that you'll see, you're like, could he have been replaced by somebody else? It's like there's always guys that are no brainers, but then you also think like, all right, who are like the biggest snubs, or you will, or who do we think probably should have made the game that didn't make the game? And in my mind, like Bryson Howard is probably the first person that comes to mind who didn't make the roster. Rivals as number 10 overall ranked player, headed to Duke next season. Dad was a former NBA All-Star. So like he comes to mind. Abdu Torre, Colbin Landrew. I think those are the ones that initially stick out to me. Like looking through this list. And I think there was like looking through social media comments yesterday. There's always like I tweeted out like Bryson Howard is the highest ranked player to not make the McDonald's roster, and then the comments were filled up with asking about guys like Dylan Mingo, Baba Ladotun. I don't think either of those guys were eligible because you have to play in 50% of your senior year games. So just so the fans are aware of that, and Baba hasn't played at all this season, and then Dylan Mingo didn't play until Hoop Hall. And that was in January, so I don't think either of those guys were able to qualify. I'm unsure about Caden Samuels if he made enough games or not, but I saw some people commenting about him as well. And then I think like Miles Sadler, probably you could have made the argument that that he makes the roster. And obviously going through this list, the one that immediately jumps out to you as the biggest surprise that made it was Darius Bivens. And like typically with the McDonald's All-American selection, it doesn't, like they're probably, obviously there's plenty of different voters. Do y'all even know how many people vote on the committee? 15? I don't even know how many.
That I don't know.
Okay. But there's obviously a handful of voters, but typically you can kind of estimate that the top 20 level guys, if they're like consensus top 20, like they're going to make the roster. And then there's going to be outliers based on positions. Like if, a big is a little bit lower ranked, like you got to kind of, fill it positionally, like Jamie was talking about. You got to have point guards, shooting guards, forwards, whatever, bigs. But with Darius Bivens, he's the lowest ranked guy that got selected. I think he's, depending on where you look, between the 80 to 90 range roughly rankings. So for him to make the roster was a little bit surprising to him, but obviously props to him. But he is the lowest ranked, at least according to my research, he's the lowest ranked player to make the McDonald's roster in over 5 years since Jackson Grant made it in 2021. And at the time he was committed to Washington. That's my initial takeaways, at least.
Yeah, seeing Bivens on that list, obviously that was the most surprising thing, really to us, the public. Shout out to him still. In saying this we're not saying that Darius isn't a good player. Seeing him in the 3SSB, he's someone that's going to play high level Division I basketball. So I mean, really good player. But like kind of to your point, when you look at guys like Bryson Howard that's not in the game, or even like Miles Sadler, who is a point guard who's having a fantastic season at Bella Vista, Colbin Landrew, stuff like that, you kind of see like, hey, those like guys like that should have gotten the game. But that's just kind of part of it. How many, each year we see guys that were snubbed out, like Conconipple a few years ago, Kingston Flemings last year. Hopefully this is used as motivation to those players, right? That next year when we look at this 2027 draft, it'd be like, oh, he didn't make the burger game. Like I think we're gonna see something. We're gonna see something like that from a few of those guys that didn't make the list. Obviously I live in Dallas, so seeing Bryson Howard not in the game, like I'm like, damn, like that, like that hurt. It hurt a little bit, but I understand it's the process. That's who they voted for. There's still some really good players on there. And I'm excited to see the practices. But there are some guys that I wish, when I go to the practices and games that were there. But, I don't want to take anything completely away from the guys that are in there. But there are some guys that really, that Abdu Torre, like that should really be in this game.
Well, I'll tell you what it is, though, is it's going to be a huge opportunity for some of these guys. You got the Darius Bivens of the world. You have the Jackson Richardsons of the world, the Austin Goosebys of the world, Quinn Costello. This is huge opportunities for these guys to come in and kind of show, some of the lower ranked guys within the process. They're going to have their chance in front of NBA executives, in front of pre-approved scouts, to be able to go head to head with the guys that are the consensus no-brainers at the very top of the rankings. So for Darius Bivens, he's going to have his opportunity to go head to head with Duron Rippey, who's a top 10 player, who's the number 2 point guard in the class going to Duke. Darius Bivens, who's uncommitted, he's going to have his chance to line up against Duron Rippey in small-sided games in the practices and all that, so that he's going to be on the floor and he's going to be able to show himself throughout the process if he should have been there or not, or whatever the case may be. The exact same with Jackson Richardson. Jackson Richardson is going to be able to go up against a Christian Collins, a Bruce Branch, guys that are consensusly people there. Jackson Richardson outside of our top 50 right now. He's an incredibly explosive player. He's a jumping jack athlete who's been known for a while, coming through the process. He's going to be able to be on the court and show what he's capable of against these players. They're going to have small-sided games where it's isolated one-on-one stuff, 2-on-2, 3-on-3, all throughout the week, and they're going to be able to compete. And then going into the 5-on-5 scrimmages and everything and into the game, they're going to be able to compete and show what they're made of. The Quinn Costello is the exact same thing. If you remember Quinn Costello, he was ranked we were on 3 at the time, but he was within our 150, but he was on the back end in the 130s. All of a sudden, he goes to Dinos' camp at Pangos. All of a sudden, he goes to the NBA Top 100 camp, and everybody's saying, "Oh wow, this kid's got something." And then he followed it up through the Under Armour stuff, and now he's a consensus top 3. He's a McDonald's All-American now. But at this time last year, Quinn Costello was not even thought about like that in that process, and he continued to get better and improve. Now he's going to be able to go up against the Ratliff twins. He's going to be able to go against Arfan Gianni. He's going to have an entire week to show, the same with Latrell Allman, the same with Austin Gooseby. Austin Gooseby, whom we were talking about off the record, he's an incredible elevator. He's somebody who makes everybody around him better. Just kind of plugs into pieces and all that type of stuff. But he's never been a go-to player on his team. Well, he's going to be able to show. He's going to be isolated in situations, in one-on-one opportunities, 2-on-2 opportunities, what he can do. Can he be more than just that connector? Can he be that alpha? Can he be that go-to player? Or is he the connector that we've seen from him consistently? Like all of these narratives that are being that we're putting together now, because that's the most fun part of this. We see a list of names. What we do immediately is we think of who should be here, who shouldn't be here. What's the storyline? Does this matter? Does this matter? Here it is. This guy versus this guy. They're all going to have their opportunity this week to show whether or not they should be there and belong, or whether or not they should not be there and they don't belong. And everybody's going to be able to see it. All the decision makers with NBA teams, all the pre-approved scouts and all that stuff, and even their peers, they're going to be able to see it. So Darius Bivens is going to be able to go into this opportunity. He's going to have Tate Kinney, who's the number 4 point guard in the class. He's going to have Duron Rippey, who's the number 2 point guard in this class. He's going to have those guys going to Kansas and Duke. He's going to have the opportunity to go up against them and see kind of where he stacks up within that. Within that, that's going to be super exciting, and that's one of the best parts of this McDonald's game. Is you see the list, and then they get to show it. They literally get to all come together and play, and you can't escape. You can't escape on the court stuff. The ball don't fly.
Right. Well, Alan Branch will always tell me you can only trick the game for so long. So just like you either are or you aren't. So really, ultimately, this is a really good opportunity for those guys to really show how good they are matched up against, other 5-star guys that are, top 10, top 5 in the country. So it'll be interesting to see. I know I'll be there, Jamie, John. I'm pretty sure y'all are going to be there. So like the practices and the scrimmage are the most exciting part. The game is fun, but I love just kind of going there and seeing them really compete and kind of seeing what they're about, even just from a toughness level.
I'll tell you what, Ani, kind of getting away from who shouldn't be there and all that type of stuff. Kind of actually talking about the roster and the games. A couple storylines that I'm really looking at here is that point guard. There's the point guard class. We have right now rivals. We put out our rankings yesterday. Our top 5 point guards in the class. Dylan Mingo is the number 1 point guard. Duron Rippey, number 2. Miles Sadler, number 3. Tate Kinney, number 4. And then Lucas Varillo, number 5. Obviously, 3 of those guys didn't make the game. 2 of them did. This could be a huge opportunity for Duron Rippey. Obviously, he's chasing Dylan Mingo for that PG1 spot right now. Dylan Mingo, the number 2 overall player, did not make it because, as Joe mentioned earlier, injury didn't make the cut for games played. But this is a massive opportunity for Duron Rippey to go out and just start dominance. Be the guy. This is a massive opportunity for Tay Kenny. Yes, Miles Sadler didn't make the game. Yes, Miles Sadler is ranked ahead of Tay Kenny right now. This is a huge opportunity for Tay Kenny to come out and show that, you know, his game is worthy of being that. This is Duron Rippey's, you know, to go out and show Duron Rippey, an incredibly explosive player. You know, a high wire act, but he's also got incredible pace. Awesome pace for a guy 6'1", plays bigger than that. As the guard, gets downhill into the teeth of the defense, makes the reads, all that type of stuff. Will he take this opportunity to show that he is the best, that he is the number one guy? Will he be able to chase down a Dylan Mingo with this opportunity? I think that's a huge storyline to be watched. Is to, yes, these other guys did not make it, but the guys here with the opportunity, what do they do with this opportunity, and can they take that step into the opportunity and really show, you know, really show where they are, and that possibly that we could have them ranked too low.
Yeah. No, 100%. And even like I'm looking at these teams. You talk about the guard spot on the East. You talk about Darius Bivens is on that roster. Tay Kenny, Josiah Jervis, Rippey, Jordan Smith, all guys that are really good with the ball in their hands. And then you look at the West, and then, you know, it's kind of like big, you know, you got the bigger guards like Brandon McCoy.
Size.
Yeah, positional size. You got Austin Gooseby, like Jason Crow's on there. But like, you know, when you talk about like Gooseby and McCoy, like McCoy obviously saw like, you say saw a dip kind of, you know, in this ranking spot like over the past, you know, couple months. But I think this is also like a really good opportunity to show that, hey, I'm still like a top 5 level player. You know, I think he's going to have a real opportunity to kind of put himself back on there. And going back to Gooseby, like looking at that roster, I think that ball is the opportunity for that ball to be in his hands a lot, you know, to elevate that, or, you know, show, to be more like, one thing about Gooseby, and I've told him this personally, like I think he can be selfish to a fault. Kind of to your point, like a connected. He's like, you gotta have to show more assertiveness, you know, ability to like self-create, score, not, you know, do not always just be like, hey, pass, mover and stuff, which is great. And he's a really talented player, but I think this could be the opportunity where he can show his value with his versatility and his self-creation. And then what I'm excited about is seeing Jason Crow out there. Like I think he's gonna go for the Burger game scoring record. Like I don't know what that is, but you know Crow's gonna put on a show. Like he's just one of those players that, like, you know, any game he can drop 50, but I think, you know, that game he's gonna be going for some scoring records. So I'm excited to see him in that environment. I think it's gonna be really, really fun to watch. But I'm really interested to see like with McCoy, like I think this can be a very, very loud week for him during that.
Yeah, I agree. And kind of to Jamie's point, like it's a great opportunity for these players to show what they're about. And I 100% agree with that. Like who can separate themselves from others, and also like the practices are where the intensity is at. Obviously, you know, kind of more versus the game. But I just really want to see like who comes and like who's ready to play and like who shows up like, you know, like I'm going to prove that, you know, that I belong here, that I'm, you know, one of the best players in the country. So I'm really interested to see, you know, who comes ready to play and who brings the energy and, you know, the intensity and the motor.
I'll tell you one thing too, going through this, and obviously I know that this isn't a rankings discussion, but I think that this opportunity could be huge because I touched on it a little bit earlier. In this class, you have number like 2 through like 13, which also includes Abu Torre and Bryson Howard. You can just ball up paper, throw it in the air, and pull it out in any way possible. There's very much parity within those rankings with high upside guys. You have the Cam Williams, you have the Anthony Thompsons, you have the Bruce Branch, Christian Collins. All those guys have incredibly high upsides with positional size, athletic fluidity, shooting touch. But then you also have the high floor guys that you know what you're going to get from: Caleb Holt, Duron Rippey, Jordan Smith, those type of guys. So it's going to be very interesting to see, you know, kind of, it's almost a preference, especially as you go at this point in time. These kids are 18 years old. They're not going to hit their physical peak until 24 or so 5-6 years down the road, obviously a year away from NBA draft. So who knows what that entire year of growth could end up being. But this week's going to be incredibly intriguing to be able to watch these guys, the high floor of a Caleb Holt, the high floor of a Jordan Smith, who's just two of the most productive players in high school basketball, against the insanely high upside of a Cam Williams. And what can those type of guys do? Can Christian Collins or Cam Williams possibly make a run at the conversation for the #1 overall spot? You know, those guys, when you talk about a Cam Williams, 6'10", 6'11", with an incredible shooting ability and athletic fluidity, those are such huge check marks that they look for at the highest levels of basketball. And Cam Williams naturally has them. Now he's growing into the physicality of the game. He's growing into the toughness and all that type of stuff. Obviously, it takes big guys a little bit longer. But what he has in his game checks the boxes at the highest levels. The intrigue is there. Christian Collins, he burst on the scene out of nowhere last summer. Went through some times of getting accustomed to being a top-ranked guy. It was up, it was down, but he always showed the flashes. During Peach Jam, the defense was there. Now, all of a sudden, this high school season, he's at the top of the scouting report, and he's producing every single game. 6'8" wing. Again, another guy with a positional versatility that checks the boxes at the highest level. Can Christian Collins do stuff this week to put himself in the conversation, possibly for #1 overall? And then Tyron Stokes is going to be there, who's been the #1 overall ever since AJ advanced the guy of this class. Tyron Stokes, the very next update, #1, been there ever since. And he's still producing at incredibly high levels and all that stuff. It's going to be very interesting to see kind of, one, personal preference that you have at the top of this class, whether the high floor or the high ceiling, or will these guys that have the high ceilings be able to step into that ceiling and show possibly that they could be the conversation for that #1 overall type of situation. Even guys at the back end, I didn't even mention Anthony Thompson. It wouldn't surprise me in 5 years if Anthony Thompson ends up being one of the best players in this class. Brandon McCoy, the exact same thing. His ability at the point of attack at 6'5", defensively, what he's able to do, flip a game on his head. Now he's understanding the pace of the game, the reads on ball, and just aggressively attacking the basket, but doing it in a non-reckless manner. He's doing it in a way that's not reckless. He's coming into his own as well. He's another one. Abdou Toure, I really wish he would have been in this game, because this would have been a massive opportunity for Abdou Toure, who had quite possibly taken as big of a step as anybody from this past year up until now. Bryson Howard, who dominated EYBL this summer, would have been a nice opportunity for him. But Abdou Toure, it wouldn't surprise me for him to end up being the #1, the best player 5 years down the road from now, being talked about as the best player from this class. That possibly could happen for him. I wish that we could have seen him in this opportunity. But I think that this class, the parity that there is at top, coming from 2 to 14 or so, those type of guys, it's going to be very interesting to see how that aspect plays out within this, and how those guys, if they can take those steps, or if the other guys can hold them off, and kind of how that plays out. That's going to be incredibly fun to watch, even from right now until after this. But this week's going to be a big opportunity for that.
Yeah, I think when it, like, to your point with Anthony Thompson, there's some guys, like, it may not impact anything right now, like, for the next, like, the last, like, 226, like, updated rankings, but I wouldn't be surprised if guys like Anthony Thompson, we look 5 years down the road, is the #1 player, and he's the best one from that class. Like Christian Collins, we talk about the highs floor of Jordan Smith, but I think like him and Caleb Holt have like very intriguing upside. Like I think there's more.
Without question.
I think there's more upside to them. And give credit, like I think those guys like have like multiple tiers they can get into, which can make them special. So I agree with you. Like we look at the top, especially like the Cam Williams, Tyron Stokes. I mean, Mingo's hurt, but like guys like Mingo. But I'm very intrigued. And Christian Collins is #3 rankings, but like Anthony Thompson, Abdou Toure here. Even like Brandon McCoy, who I think is really starting to come along. Caleb Gaskins, we haven't really talked about him, but how impactful he's been. I mean, I know Columbus may not be having like as loud of a season as like last year, but like he's been really good.
He's another one of those high floor guys. I mean, kind of look at what Reggie Bullock's been able to kind of do in the league. Look at that kind of archetype of player that Caleb Gaskins could be able to possibly, positionally, walk into. With Caleb Holt, look at like what Malcolm Brogdon's been able to do and stuff. And look at that kind of positional thing. It's like there's a little bit more obvious there. Jordan Smith, look at Cason Wallace or Avery Bradley. Like these guys, you have a little bit more understanding as to what they are as players. But what they are as players, guys in that archetype, guys in that positional lineage, have had a lot of success in the highest levels.
Right. Even guys like Bruce Branch, we haven't mentioned, and like guys like someone that has a really, really high ceiling. Like I just think there's multitude of guys that ultimately we can look back and be like, oh, like that. They're the best of the class. And I think that's where ultimately, like when we look down into those guys getting into those second contracts in NBA, we're going to look back and be like, okay, this class was maybe stronger than we thought, or we were right with
Yeah.
classes not as, because the thing about this class is that it's not a strong class, right? So like,
Yeah.
but I think like look at it as 5 years down the road, we'll get a better feel of how good or not so good this class is.
For sure. There's some value swings there, and the guys we talked about, and there's some high upside swings there too. And I'm just eager to see how the high upside guys kind of do this week. And can anybody else kind of make a run into that conversation? A person that I'm very interested in seeing is JJ Andrews. I'm eager to see kind of what he looks like when you put up against positionally. What does he do positionally? How does he match up against other guys his size, and where is that? He's been unbelievable. He's sham and all that type of stuff coming in this past year. Winning it all and everything. He's been great. So I'm very eager to see. He's one of the ones that I'm really looking strongly at to see how he does. Quinn Costello is another one who's right there on the cusp. He's right there at the value that he brings as a 6'10" shooter who's a fluid athlete and can move. He's got a little bit of pop to his game and all that stuff. He's right there on the cusp of taking a step. When I watched him earlier this year live, he had 36 in the game. He had one play where he ripped through from the free throw line, went up and dunked on a late rotating big man. Shooting, I think he knocked down 6 threes in that game and all that type of stuff. So it's there. I'm eager to see what he looks like in this setting.
Absolutely. Joe, any closing thoughts, just about this roster, this game, what people can kind of look forward to as we get closer going into Phoenix?
Yeah, I think it's a really good opportunity for the fan bases of these players. Like we got players go to Oklahoma State, Mizzou, Michigan State, Kansas, North Carolina, Duke, USC, Miami, Texas, Houston. The list goes on. And a lot of the time, like they watch. Fans will watch highlights on YouTube of players that are coming to their teams, or they'll tune into a YouTube live stream rarely. But I think it's an awesome opportunity to be able to see and witness them play against the top players in the country, and kind of like we were talking about how they stack up, and also what these fan bases are going to be able to get in these future players. And obviously, it's the highest honor in all of high school basketball. So I think that fans will really be able to appreciate that, being able to kind of see what their future program is getting in a lot of these guys. So I know they're definitely stoked for that.
No, that's really good insight, Joe. Those fan bases, I know they're going to be really excited to see like the future like players into their program. So listen, guys, that's the Next Gen McDonald's All-American Game Pod. We'll see you at the next episode. Appreciate you guys for always listening in.